Okay, everyone, so it's about 2 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started here. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Measuring Your Marketing ROI, It's Easier Than You Think. My name is Allison Thompson, and I'll be your moderator. A little bit about myself. I work on the internal marketing team here at ThinkShow, so I help manage and implement all of ThinkShow's own marketing initiatives and campaigns, and I'm very excited to be on today's webinar with you all. So according to a recent article in Forbes based off of a 2018 CMO spend survey conducted by Gartner, after a 3-year bull run of budget increases, marketing budget growth stalled in 2017 to 2018. CMOs and marketing leaders must now justify past budget commitments and show the returns they deliver to ensure future fiscal health of marketing, according to the Gartner CMO spend survey. The survey also showed that many marketing leaders struggle to budget for expected returns. Budgeting and fiscal immaturity can stifle the relationship between CMOs and CFOs and put future budgets at risk. And while CMOs' budgets have grown steadily over the past 3 years, there are signs this asset may have peaked. Budgets fell from 12.1% of company revenue in 2016 to 11.3% in 2017. Which is why today I'm pleased to introduce Chris Peer. Chris will be sharing insights on obstacles to measuring marketing ROI and how you can easily measure it, helping you to secure and retain the budgets you need to continue to grow. Chris is the founder and CEO of ThinkShow, a lead generation and inbound marketing company here in Rocky River, Ohio. Chris has more than 20 years of experience in B2B digital marketing strategy, sales process, and customer communications. Prior to starting Idea Engine and ThinkShow, Chris has worked for other independent design studios and corporations, including Ernst & Young and American Greetings. Now, before I hand the mic over to Chris, I just have a few housekeeping items to cover. First, shortly after today's webinar, a recorded version will be available on thinkshow.com in the Resources Center where you can rewatch it, and we'll also email you a link to the recorded version. Next, we'd love to hear from you during today's presentation. So if you have a question for our speaker, just feel free to enter your questions on the control panel off to the right in the questions box. And we'll be sure to dedicate some time at the end of the session for answers to your questions. But if we don't happen to get to your question during today's webinar, we'll be sure to follow up with you afterward. And without further ado, I'd like to kick things off by welcoming our CEO, Chris. Chris, over to you.
Hi, Allison. Thanks. Can everybody hear me? I hope everybody can hear me. So I'm going to kick right in.
You're good.
Thanks, Allison. So today we've got about an hour webinar to talk about your marketing ROI. And as that Gartner poll that illustrated that Allison just talked about, we are seeing that in the digital marketing space, in the sales process with organizations pretty much at every level. People today, management and senior management today, are demanding that we illustrate the return on investment prior to investing in a marketing spend. So that's what this is all about today. If you have any questions, as Allison mentioned, we'll answer them at the end, and I welcome any follow-up questions afterwards as well. So let's jump right in. So why do we want to track the marketing return on investment? We see a lot throughout all of our engagements that once the ROI is tracked and you can actually start to make sense of the return on investment, marketing becomes an investment and not an expense. And this is really important because not only does it lead towards an additional investment in marketing in the future, but it allows us to really hold our own in the marketing space. Greater marketing effectiveness and the elimination of what I call whack-a-mole style marketing is also a really important component of measuring the ROI. Whack-a-mole style marketing is what I usually use to describe when companies are doing marketing initiatives that they have no idea if they're working or not. They just do them because they always have. By tracking the ROI of each and every initiative, we can eliminate that and have greater marketing effectiveness overall. Marketing to profit measurement. When we are tracking the ROI, not only are we measuring the return on investment, but we're looking at the profits, which adds to the top and bottom line for company growth And then in the end, what we all want as marketers and in people in sales is marketing becomes heroes, sales team becomes heroes, and everybody's happy. So real quickly, just wanted to talk about what the definition of return on a marketing investment is. And it's pretty simple. It's the contribution to profit attributable to marketing, net of the marketing spending, divided by the amount invested or risked in the marketing initiative. If your marketing does not provide an ROI, then it's going to be seen as an expense, which is going to limit the ability for marketing in the future. So just a couple quick examples here. I want to talk a little bit about revenue or profit. A lot of companies, when they measure their marketing ROI, they're typically talking about revenue, and we want to make sure that we're taking in the profit equation as a component. So if your company spends $100,000 on a digital marketing initiative, and the marketing effort returns $1 million in revenue, then the ROI is 10 times. However, you have to factor in the profit margins. So if your profit margins are 40%, then the margin ROI, or what I call the true ROI, minus the marketing expense of $100,000 is actually $300,000. So you've got a 3 times ROI there. And at Sync Show, as you'll see later in the slide deck, if we don't factor in a 2 times return, typically we recommend that it's not a good investment for organizations. You should see approximately a 2%, sometimes 3%. We've seen 5 and 10% return on investment as well. But what we see more often than not, our companies do not track their marketing ROI. And I wanted to first talk a little bit about the 5 reasons that marketing ROI is not tracked. One is fear of failure. I actually had a person tell me the other day that they were afraid to track the ROI because their executive team might see that the marketing isn't working. And so it's really important to make sure that we are tracking that ROI so we can prove the value in it. But if you're afraid of it, we're going to talk a little bit about that in a moment. Perceived as being too difficult. A lot of people think it's very difficult to track the ROI. And there are some road bumps and some hazards we have to get through, but we're going to talk about that in a moment. Also, it's perceived as being too expensive. It's not expensive at all. In fact, once you factor in the correct equations, you'll see that it's pretty cost effective. Other companies or other people complain that they don't have the tools or the data. So we're going to talk today about how to find that data and what tools to leverage. And then a lack of knowledge. This is probably the largest area for learning. It is not easy in a lot of ways, but we're going to walk through that today. In the deck that we have today, if you want to download it afterwards, are going to have a lot of references, resource materials, and actually some of the equations that we use here at Sync Show for our clients. So fear of failure, I want to talk a little bit about that. So if you are a marketer, you must tie your efforts to profits or you risk being obsolete. We are seeing this more and more as companies are changing their infrastructure. It's so important that we tie it to profits. A lot of times this is very new for organizations. So it could be a building process. It may take time. It may take several months, several quarters, or even a year or more to really put the pieces together. But if you can tie it to profits, job security is there for you. So let's talk a little bit about fear of failure. Marketing is a science. It's really become that complicated today. You will fail, and you'll probably fail often, just as scientists do. It's really about embracing that failure and moving on. It's not that the overall campaign should fail. It's just systems or implementations may not yield the results that you're looking for. So every initiative or campaign may not work as planned, but the challenge is to analyze, adjust, and move on. Have key performance indicators. These are what we call KPIs for everything you do. We have a client that does a lot of radio advertising that Sync Show does not do, and the radio advertising, by and large, is not trackable the way they're doing it. There are ways to track it through digital components, but this particular organization chooses not to. It's really important that you track that because they're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on radio advertising that they can't really prove an ROI on. Continuously track, analyze, and report on every marketing effort, and then understand that you must test, retest, and retest again. Keep changing things up to see what works and what does not. If you use some of the tools that we're going to talk about today, and you use the data that you get from those tools, you will find that everything can be measured, and you can see what's working and what's not, and then what you should start doing, stop doing, and keep doing. Encourage your team to take risks and embrace their failures. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Many opportunities are out there, especially as social media changes, search engine optimization changes. There are a lot of opportunities to try. As long as you're using data to guide you, you may find some surprises that are of great benefit to you. If you cannot track it, don't do it. This is our kind of motto here at SyncShow. It's very important to make sure that you are tracking everything you're doing. And then if you are afraid of failure and you've got some of these other things, bring in an expert. Bring in an agency or hire an expert or a team of experts to be your guide, people that have done it before, to reduce your risk for failure. And then set your team up for success. Ensure you have the right tools, define clear communications, define accountability, and make sure you have alignment with your sales team. If you don't have alignment with your sales team, this is going to be much more difficult in the future. So another one of the reasons people do not track their ROI is they think it's too difficult. And actually, it's a lot easier than you may think. If you are new to this, we recommend that you take baby steps and build sophistication in over time. Again, it may take you several quarters, several months, maybe even several years, but the importance is to make sure that you are moving forward to building an ROI equation and that your marketing gets stronger and stronger. So as I just mentioned, take one step at a time. Don't let it overwhelm you. Oftentimes, you'll depend on other departments within your organization to get the information that you need, such as what your organization's profit margins are, what your average order values are from a customer, customer lifetime value, your lead to customer percentage or your close rate. Many organizations that we start working with don't even have this information available. So sometimes it's very difficult to get this, but if you lay this out at the beginning and you talk about how important these things are, oftentimes this information can be found. Be patient, work with these departments for mutual success. However, I also caution, be prepared for some pushback. Not always does every department want to give you data because they have fear of failure as well, or fear that their numbers may not be as strong as they need to be. But if you approach this with your senior leadership as an investment in the future and an investment into righting the ship, then this can go a long way. And if at the end, when you're in doubt, estimate. If you are looking for specific data that you cannot get from the other departments, estimate to the best of your ability and include them into your calculations, as we're going to walk through in a moment. And then once you know what to measure and how to measure, I think you'll find that it's much easier than you think. Too expensive. Here at SyncShow, when we look at marketing as an expense, we really try to adjust our customers' thinking as it's not an expense, it's an investment. And there's a quote down here, in business, there is no such thing as an expense. Everything you spend money on should be an investment. It's really important to make sure that this is an investment. So we look and we say, if you're not going to get a 2 times return on the investment within the first 12 months, it's a no-go as a guide. It's not always the law. Sometimes there is a larger base building period that might take 12 to 14 to 16 months before you can really start to see the growth and the investment come to life for you. So each organization is going to be different. Lack of tools. I say no excuses here because Google Analytics is a very powerful tool that you can use. It's not the end-all be-all, but it has a lot. It's free. It takes literally like an hour to set up. And it's very easy to use and start getting the information and the data out of Google Analytics. And then most importantly, we talk about the return on investment component. Include the cost of your marketing tools in the ROI equation, not just the spend on advertising or pay-per-click or agency fees or content, et cetera. And then lack of tools. So as we're talking about that, here are some tools that we use here at SyncShow. First and foremost, marketing automation software in general. We've got Acton, Pardot, Marketo, HubSpot. These are all marketing automation software platforms. They all have different capabilities and features and functions. Here at SyncShow, we are a HubSpot Platinum partner. We also have many clients on Pardot. Our preference is HubSpot, and if anybody wants to ask me why, I'll be happy to answer that in the question section afterwards. Just type into the questions section in your GoToWebinar control panel, and I'll make sure I talk a little bit more about that. We also use Google Analytics pretty heavily, and then from time to time, we use an Excel spreadsheet to make sure that we're tracking specific information and crunching the numbers. Some other metrics tools we use. Specifically for website analysis. Not all of these are ROI tools, but these are tools we use to ascertain how well things are working. There's a software called Insights by a company called SilkTide that can run a website report for you. Crazy Egg, webpagetest.org is a speed software. It's free. Pingdom, Test My Site, Google Structured Data Testing Tools. I won't go through all of these. But again, you can download this deck afterwards and just see some of the tools that we use. Some of these are free. Some of these are professional level tools that require a more sophisticated and larger investment. And last but not least, we've got the SyncShow KPI Tracker. This is something that we distribute to our clients on a quarterly basis. I'm going to show you an example of that later in this deck. And again, you can download it after the webinar today. Lack of knowledge. Last but not least is, how do we do this? So as I mentioned before, digital marketing is rocket science today. At least I feel it is. It's become so much more sophisticated. Here on our team, our clients may have 5 to 7 different people or specialty skill sets working on their account any given time. Anywhere from search engine optimization to writers, graphic designers, video experts, strategists, you name it. So putting this all together is really important, and it can be overwhelming. So some of the tools and some of the areas to improve your knowledge I've listed here on this slide. One is the Inbound Conference that's put on by HubSpot every year. This is actually going on next week in Boston. If you haven't gone, it's a fantastic conference. Also right here in the Cleveland area where SyncShow is located is Content Marketing World. This is downtown Cleveland. That's next week as well. HubSpot Academy, that's a free online resource where you can register and actually get inbound marketing certified. And through some of their certification programs, they have information about return on investment marketing. The Digital Marketing ROI Calculator. This is SyncShow's ROI Calculator, which I'm going to show you in just a little bit. This is on our website, and all of these references here have links if you download the document afterwards. Then a couple good reads. These are some blog articles on how to measure ROI marketing, and then a refresher on marketing ROI that I particularly like. So now that we've talked about some of the reasons that people don't do return on investment marketing, let's talk about some of the really important components. Data. Data is so important to what we do in marketing today. I'd even say that we typically leverage and use more data than sales, sometimes even more than the financial departments, just because there's so much data available to us to reference and cross-reference. So understanding what to measure and where to acquire the required data fields and the information are critical to your success. So before we jump into some of the data that we want to talk about, I want to just go through some definitions. If you're in marketing, these may not be new to you. If you're not, these are probably somewhat fairly new and maybe a little confusing. So sessions. Sessions is basically website visits. This is how many visits you get to your website in a particular time period. The S2LCR is the session to lead conversion rate. I won't go through each and every one of these, but I want to talk a little bit about the L2MQLCR and the L2SQLCR. As we look at the return on investment for marketing, not only do we have to look at the leads you get, but are they qualified? So we typically qualify leads into 3 different categories. One is your standard lead or a conversion on your website. This would be anybody that fills out a form on your website, anybody that calls from your website, anything we can track as a engagement through the digital marketing. But not all leads are qualified. Some of them might not be a lead at all. It might just be a conversion. So an MQL, or a marketing qualified lead, is one that meets your buyer's persona. And as you'll see down here, the buyer persona is a stereotypical profile of the buyer that you're targeting. And we have a whole process we go through. You can also find that on the HubSpot Academy education and training website. Not all marketing qualified leads are going to go to sales. They might not be ready yet. So sales qualified lead is what we call an SQL. And you'll see these determined here. And then last but not least, we're going to revisit the customer lifetime value a number of times throughout today. This is basically the revenue driven from a typical customer or your target customer for the entire lifetime that you're doing business with that customer. Knowing what that number is going to really help define the long-term return on investment for you. So goals and objectives. I wanted to share one slide here. The next slide is going to be some examples of some of our customers' goals and objectives that they've had. But I first wanted to mention, you can't measure your return on investment until you clearly define your goals and objectives. And then also have a multi-year vision. This isn't going to happen overnight. Oftentimes you have to take into account your sales cycles, the acquisition of this data, setting up all the tools necessary. So really look at this as a multi-year vision. And here at ThinkShare, we typically look out approximately 3 years. So here are some example goals and objectives that our clients typically have. We try to make these as smart as possible, meaning specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. So when that's not possible, we can get a little bit more generic with them, but generate 5 to 10 sales qualified leads per month via the website. Now, some of you may be saying that's a lot of leads, that would be great, or sales qualified leads. Some of you are saying that that might be very small. It really depends on your organization as far as the goal here. Increase current customer sales growth through digital communications. This is often a forgotten approach. If you improve your digital communications to your existing customers, you can often track the cross-selling and upselling opportunities with those customers. Establish a presence and create awareness in new markets, whether it's geographic or vertical. That's a common objective. And then increase website traffic by 50% in 12 months. That's not an uncommon objective as well. Again, we should tie these all back to ROI through the entire process. So here I wanted to share, this is our KPI tracking document. This is actual data from an actual client. I kept the name of the client confidential, but this was from April 1st, 2018 to June 30th. And what I'm trying to show here is these are some of the things that we believe you should be tracking on a monthly basis, and then we report quarterly on them. And these are the KPIs that we typically are tracking down the left-hand side, or the key performance indicators. So sessions, as we mentioned, are website visits, leads, the session to lead conversion rate, marketing qualified leads, the lead to marketing qualified rate conversion rate, sales qualified leads, the lead to sales qualified lead conversion rate, and then how many new customers. So you'll see here that in April, May, and June, we had a goal, and then we reported on the actual. So the goals are based on customers' current state, the investment that they're making in the marketing. And basically, if we have data going back, we can look at seasonality. So if we have Google Analytics or HubSpot to look at the traffic month over month for multiple years, we can make some assumptions about seasonality. And then also having some market awareness as to what's going on in the news. I was at a customer meeting this morning, and they were talking about how the tariffs from China are really going to affect their sales moving forward. So we have to take all that into account and make some assumptions with these goals. But the important component is that you are tracking them. And you'll see here, everything in green is where we exceeded the goal. And then here, we didn't quite exceed the session to lead conversion rate, but all the other things after that are very positive. So this was a really good scenario for this particular client. Here's, again, some suggested goals. So once we provided that report, we actually provided a future assessment moving forward. So we delivered this in June or early July, and then we had some goals for July, August, and September. And again, you may see some discrepancies here and say, well, why are there 2 customers in July but only 1 in August? Again, this may go to the amount of leads they got in previous quarters, may go to their sales cycle, or it may just go to seasonality in the business. I put a couple of slides in here. These are actually from HubSpot, and what we're showing here is traffic to a website by month, and each vertical bar is representative of the total traffic for that month. So you can see here this particular customer had a little over 8,000, about 8,500 visitors to their website this month in last April. But what's really important here are the colors of the bars. And the reason I shared this is knowing what you're doing and knowing what data you have will help you to improve your return on investment in the future. So green is organic traffic, blue is direct traffic, and you can go through the rest of this graph here by color to see where the traffic's coming from. But you'll see organic traffic not only drove 12,528 sessions over this 3-month period, but they got 88 new contacts or what we would call leads. Again, not all of them may be true leads, but then using the tools within HubSpot, you can track the MQLs or the SQLs and then track it to sales. But knowing where your successes are so important to determine what you should start doing, keep doing, and stop doing. This particular chart, it looks almost identical to the previous one, but this is actually new contacts. So not only is it just looking at where your traffic's coming from, but those 88 contacts we mentioned, where are they coming from? And again, it breaks it down into a slightly different view. You can deep dive into this pretty detailed. As an example, social media drove 4 contacts. We must not have been doing a lot of social media for this particular client during these 3 months. But if I wanted to know where those 4 converted, I could see by clicking in, did they come from LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, etc. So let's get into data. How are we going to write this formula for tracking ROI? And the common question we always get is, how do we get the data in the first place? So I won't go through each and every one of these particular areas. You're welcome to dive in deeper after the webinar today and look at this particular graph. But here's where we recommend finding some of this data. Average website sessions is, you can find that typically in Google Analytics or HubSpot or another analytics software. And then as we're using the metrics for the future ROI calculation, we assume an increase month over month, typically for the marketing effort. And we can use that in the ROI projection moving forward. Average leads per month, your close rate, your customer value. A lot of these, again, you're going to rely on different departments. So it might be your financial department, your CFO, or maybe it's a VP of sales in your CRM, like Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics. Again, if you're not tracking this data today, maybe the first step is to start tracking the data and get some of these tools in place so that you can make educated decisions in the future. So now that we know how to get the data, I want to make sense of the data. So here we're going to talk a little bit about how we start formulating the ROI calculator. In a couple of moments, I'm also going to share with you the ThinkShow online ROI calculator, where you can just plug in your numbers, and we use some assumptions from our client history and client success over the years. But if you want to create your own, here's a basic way to do it. So average website sessions. Assuming you have 5,000 sessions per month would be the starting point. First, using Google Analytics or HubSpot, how many sessions are you getting per month? Then you look at the average number of leads per month that your website is currently getting. Oftentimes, we find that most organizations are well below the average threshold. The average threshold is 2 to 5% should be your session to lead conversion rate. So this is really important. If you are getting less than 2% of your leads from your website, it typically tells us that your website may be broken or your value proposition is weak. So as you're doing this calculation, if you find that you're between the 2 and 5%, heck, go for 10%, go for 8, 9, 10%. But if it is below the 2% threshold, there's some opportunity for improvement there. And again, it may be the user interface design of your website. Maybe it's too slow. There may be some broken links. Or maybe your value proposition needs some work and you need to craft your value proposition language. However, once we know how many total sessions you're getting in a given month, and we know how many leads you're getting, and I'm just assuming you're at the bottom end of average, which would be 2%. If you had 5,000 sessions, you'd have about 100 leads per month. So now what do we do with that? Well, we know not every lead or conversion is going to be qualified, so we look at how many marketing qualified leads you're getting, and we look at a conversion rate. For our customers here at SyncShow, our customers average about 40% of the people that contact them through the internet are marketing qualified leads. Again, those are leads that meet the buyer persona or the targeted buyer. So 40% of 100 is 40, so now we've got 40 MQLs. And now we need to see how many of those are going to be bumped to sales. How many of those are the sales team going to be talking to? And has the sales team qualified and said, yes, these are great leads that we want to continue talking to? And typically you see it's about 50% or lower from MQL to SQL. And so that leaves us, for example purposes here, about 20 hot leads that sales are going to talk to. $12 new customers. In here for example purposes, so 12 new sales would be about $20,000 as your average order value for the first year, which would be $240,000 in total incremental sales month over month. And then I highlighted in blue here, this is the customer lifetime value. I do like to continue looking at the customer lifetime value. Many times a new customer is going to be worth hundreds of thousands over maybe a 4, 5, 10-year period. I think that should be taken into consideration when you're figuring out your ROI. So if your company knows this, this year. Then your profit margins. We typically hear profit margins anywhere from 5% to 40%. So I just put 20 in for the equation. So if we had 12 new sales, well, I kept the 50,000 here, but if we had the profit margin on $240,000, you'd have about $576,000 in profit over the period of the year. And then just like that second slide said in this deck, when you back out your marketing expenses, and I just assumed a $10,000 per month budget on marketing, you would have a 4.5 times ROI with $456,000 in your marketing ROI. So long-term return on investment. Again, keep a look at that customer lifetime value. Your true ROI may not be as dramatic in the first 6 to 18 months. However, keep an eye on that, and then you can really report on that to your senior leadership as being really important. And I've got a couple expert tips here to leave you with, and then we can go into some questions. So perhaps the most important KPI that I believe to track is your session to lead conversion rate. So again, as I mentioned earlier, it's 2 to 5%. If it's not at the 2% at least, then something's wrong, something's broken. So I would immediately work to fix it. Usually this is an issue, as I mentioned, with your website or your value proposition. Use data to support and guide all of your marketing decisions when possible. If you just don't have the data, then make some assumptions and make sure you're tracking it so that you can use that data to identify this last bullet on here, which is to stop doing, keep doing, or start doing. And then identify where, when, and how all of your leads are finding you. if all of your leads are coming from LinkedIn and you're doing heavy promotion in Twitter, you may want to rethink that strategy. Move the money, move the effort, move the initiative around to what's working. And then in a moment, I'll share the ROI Calculator with you. Again, you can click on it through this deck. You can run the numbers for yourself instead of creating your own calculator. If you have any questions about that ROI Calculator and the numbers that you receive back from it, I'm happy to explain how that calculator works. We've got a pretty sophisticated calculation going on in the back end that's based on ThinkShow's average customer successes. So it's not true to exactly what I just showed you through this presentation. And then I'd like to jump into some questions. So Allison, I'll put this on mute and hand it back over to you.
Sure. So Chris, the first question I have here is, how do you differentiate between website sessions, meaning very short sessions, almost bounces, versus longer sessions when a person actually is engaged with content? Or do you look only at total number of visits?
That's a great question. So as we look at I look at total sessions as the equation, just because that's where the industry averages come from of 2 to 5%. When you have a very short session, that could be considered a bounce, which means they go to one web page and then they immediately leave. That could be a good thing or a bad thing. If your bounce rate's really high, anything over 50, 60, 70%, typically you might want to really look into why they're bouncing. That's a whole different conversation, but remember that sometimes when people bounce, they just came into one page to get information that they were looking for. They got it and they left, which could be a phone number, it could be an address, it could be answer to a question. So not always is a bounce a really bad thing. Overall, you just got to look at the strategy and what's working and what's not.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you for answering that. And another question for you here. What or where is a good starting point for a company just entering the digital marketing space?
Could you repeat that, Allison? I'm sorry.
Sure. It's what or where is a good starting point for a company just entering the digital marketing space?
I'm not sure exactly what this question is asking, but if I'm interpreting it correctly, getting started immediately, sooner than later. A lot of times digital marketing does have a baseline setup period. A lot of people say, well, I'm going to invest X amount of dollars and I want a return on investment in 6 months. It's just not going to happen for most companies unless you've already got a strong base in place. It's not uncommon for us to get into a strategy session and find out that a lot of these tools are lacking or their website may need adjusting, sometimes rebuilt. System has to work as a system, and if one particular component of that system is broken or badly damaged, it needs to be repaired. So that can take several months sometimes to get up and running. So I recommend that people look at a long-term vision and a long-term future. The truth is this is not going away. If you haven't invested in digital marketing, you're probably pretty far behind the curve already, and many of your competitors already have. And the longer you wait, the harder it is to catch up. It's a race. And I've seen companies that have done two things. One, they started very early, they had great success, and then one thing led to another, and they decided life was good, profits were high, they were going to stop the investment in marketing, and then 2 years later, their competitors are killing them because their competitors outpace them. And then I've seen other organizations that put up a small website and didn't invest in it, and then they wondered why they didn't get any results, and their competitors are killing them. So it really is a race and a competition amongst you and your competitors.
Gotcha. Okay. One more question here. It is, can you talk a little bit more about website design and the impact on conversion rates?
Absolutely. So as we talk about conversion rates at 2 to 5%, that's, like I said, that's so important as a KPI to track. The website design, the look and feel of the site, the site speed, how quickly it loads, the content that you have on each page of the website is so critical. If you don't engage people on every page of your website, and I'll back up for a moment, I recommend you have a strategy for every single page. a lot of people have what I would call an online brochure. If you don't actually think about every page and how you're going to engage people and get them to convert and have a website and a design that encourages that, you're already missing the boat. I was just down at a customer meeting this morning. It was their annual meeting, and they were talking about their growth. And it's a company that's been doing very well. Their digital marketing, we've been working with them for about 4 years. They just landed a $1.5 million contract in a Southern African country because of SEO and the SEO that we did. But it's not just the search engine optimization. The page that person landed on, that new prospect that turned into a $1.5 million contract, that page had conversion points on it. And these conversion points are things that we implement or we call call to actions on every page of the website, so that if you want to engage and you want to further the conversation as a prospective buyer, you can do that very easily through the website. Any other questions?
It looks like we do have one more here for you, Chris, and that is, why do you prefer HubSpot and how do you recommend using it to track ROI?
Great. So of the marketing automation platforms, and I don't have any beef with any of them. They all do a certain, they offer a certain value, and each one of them is very different. Marketo is a great tool. Acton's a great tool. Pardout's a great tool. The reason I like HubSpot is it's one of the few tools, it's actually the only one that I know of, that really integrates the entire digital marketing system. And what I mean by that is it includes your ability to manage and track every component of the ecosystem. Not only can you build your website on the platform, but it's got a CRM integrated with it. So we here at SyncShow, we can track not only all of our digital marketing efforts, but we can track and see all the leads that come in. And then if our customers are using the CRM component or have it integrated with their other CRM like Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics or Sugar, et cetera, we can actually see when they become customers. So that becomes extremely, extremely powerful when we can actually look and see this particular customer came from a digital marketing effort. Furthermore, which is really important, is we can look at all the customers that came from a digital marketing effort, and we can determine where they converted or why they converted. Was it from a trade show that we had a digital marketing advertising at? Was it from a pay-per-click advertising on Google or Yahoo or Bing? Or was it a social media post in a LinkedIn group? And we can start to see commonalities as to what's working and what's not, and what's actually driving the revenue and the profits that our customers are looking for.
Okay. Well, thank you, Chris. It looks like that is all the questions that we have. Do you have any more closing comments before we finish?
No, I guess I would just suggest that if this is new to you, feel free to call and ask questions. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. And I guess I would just say, if it is new to you and it's a little overwhelming, take your time and build up to it. And if you continue to start working or chipping away at your marketing ROI, it will come and it'll be easier and easier as you go.
Sounds good. Well, thank you, Chris. And I just want to say we really appreciate all of you joining us today. And we would be more than happy to follow up with any of you offline if you have a more detailed question or if you just wanted to discuss something one-on-one. Again, this webinar will be available shortly after today's event in a recorded format on syncshow.com in the Resources Center. And we'll also email you a link and provide you the link to our ROI Calculator where you can demo the tool yourselves. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Thanks, Allison.
Thank you. Bye.